Well, if no one wants to join more, then I think I can start. If anyone has any questions later, fine to obviously stop me. But so I thought today to mention this new command line tool that I learned about 2 weeks ago, and I happen to deal with cloud object stores a bit in my work, and so far I've been using AWS command line tool, and many years ago there was something called s5cmd, if I recall correctly. But this one is interesting, and so I thought when my time came for this call the doctor session, so maybe I can talk about this a little. So why I thought it's interesting for this session? Well, when I found out about it, first I noticed the word parallel. Said, oh, HDF users like parallel. Then I saw file system. Said, oh, even better. And then I found it somewhere here that says very fast. So I said, this is ideal for HDF community, parallel file system, very fast, and yet works with S3 object stores. So I thought it's a good candidate. And so it's a command line tool written in the Go programming language, and really has a very extensive README. This is probably the most complete README document in GitHub repositories that I've seen. Not that I'm, some authority on that, but it's really comprehensively describing what this tool can do. And I will, but here is the, in short, as he says, offers a very fast speed of execution. And not only that, but in my 2 weeks of playing with it, it has some very nice way to make working with object stores and buckets there in S3 more human friendly. In other words, some awkward operations that I found with AWS command line tool, this one, for example, does very well. I'll show you some very briefly. But anyway, so I'm not going to move files around because I don't want to incur data egress costs to HDF Group, but basically its biggest selling point is that it really can move data either out of the bucket or into the bucket very, very effectively. And it says, when I see can saturate 40 gigabits per second link, it's something that I'm kind of, I think it's very nice if it can really happen. And so it's really done as a command line tool. And I actually discovered that for me to get it on my Mac, from which I'm recording this, it's a bit more work. My favorite package management source, the Conda Forge, actually doesn't have a build for ARM64 Macs. And so my only way that I actually got this tool to run for just playing with it was having a Docker container in that way. So I'll come back later and show some little things. But anyway, this is the list of things it can do. And again, how many things everyone will need all of that? Obviously not. But shell auto completion is an interesting one. I was not able to do it mainly because I needed to install more things that I didn't have time to play with that. The select JSON records from objects using SQL expressions, that was like, that's an interesting one, but I'll show you later what they actually do. It's actually something in Amazon's cloud service. And but this one I found very useful, which is wildcard support for all operations. It very makes people who used to use typical list command on their file system sort of much more easier to think about what they want to do than what AWS command line actually does. And installation, yes, I use Conda Forge because I want to have everything in a virtual environment. So I don't want to install things in system locations on my laptop. But if that's what people like, this is obviously the way to do it. Either Homebrew or Mac ports can do it. This is the one that works probably for anyone, unless you have ARM64 Mac. Yeah, this is the one I use basically. I pulled this Docker image from Docker Hub, and it worked for me. This is the only thing here that's important. I'll show you that later. But obviously, if you want to use your AWS credential stuff, then you have to mount your AWS folder on your computer there into the Docker container. And usage, I think this is the most likely form of the command I will use so far and the most useful. That basically what it says, copy everything that's below, obviously, that has, let me see how to put it this way, that contains all these things in the key name. Obviously, we know that in buckets, these folders / hierarchy doesn't exist. That's just a fake folder like abstraction. But basically, this is what I would do, for example, if I was copying my computer from one folder to another somewhere. And this is something that I struggled when I had the AWS command line tool to work with. I obviously said I'm not going to move files around here to test its speed, but I did simple ls and other things when I was trying it. It was really fast. It seems to be really, really what it says. Now, obviously, supports a whole bunch of other things that are now expected from any tool that works with AWS S3, or how to invoke different profiles, how to say where credentials files are, all the other things. Obviously, works with the environmental variables if they're available. And there are some other things that are really useful for those who are on EC2 instances or in terms of the Elastic Kubernetes service. But again, this is beyond what I could do in a simple demo. Of interesting things here is that it does respect the hierarchy, essentially. What I mean, when you say copy something from the bucket with this kind of asterisk shape command, it will actually copy it and then create folders and everything properly on your file system. So it can do, it can do the right thing as you would expect. Whereas with AWS, you always have to sort of find a way how you want to do it yourself. Uploading, obviously, we're not going to cover. Stream, okay, this is an interesting one that you can actually pipe into S5, this command, essentially some file, like, compress it, and then immediately it'll upload into the bucket. So it's very useful to be sort of like, a one-liner, where Unix people always like to do that kind of thing. Deleting, I think they forgot here to use the quotation marks. I missed it in this line, but you can see it smartly deletes things more than a single one. And an interesting thing here that I found is this. I mentioned select JSON object using SQL. So this is obviously if you have JSON, objects with JSON in them, and but it runs the SQL query using, essentially an AWS service that supports those kind of things. So it's not like the command itself has this capability. It's actually dials into the AWS service for this. So I'm assuming it's going to cost some money to do these things, but at least allows you to do it. And for example, this is a nice thing how you can pull out some things out of this JSON, like objects that are stored there for people who tend to store data as JSON. The one that I really liked was this one. And This really was something that I never thought about. You know, I can show you now. I can share this other screen for a little demo. What are we talking about here? Yes, that's it. So what I have here is, so this is the command when once I pull this Docker image on my laptop, and I'm running Docker on my laptop as well. This is the command line I use to start it, and it's fairly straightforward Docker run command. Only here I have RM, which means once this Docker container is done, the Docker will destroy that container. In other words, I don't want to keep this container for later. I just want one sort of use and throw away Docker container. The other thing I had to do is the container, the Docker image that they have is designed basically to immediately run s5cmd with some commands. And I wanted more interactive ability to play with it. So I basically say, instead of the built-in entry point into this Docker image, I basically say, no, my entry point is going to be just a bash shell. And so when I start this image now, I'm inside the Docker container, so it doesn't execute this command. And I poked a little around this container, so this is not the right place to be for me. But if I go to the root, that's where they put this s5cmd command here. So so if I want to run this command, for example, help. Okay, so there's no version. So you see, there's a bunch of things, but this is all the commands that are available. And if you want more information for them, I think we can use, for example, SSC, and then let's say a version. Let's see what the version is. All right. We can do, for example, DU and help. And I think it'll give us some more help. Yes. So we see now for DU specifically, there are a bunch of other options that can be used: group, humanize, exclude value, and all these kind of things. So you can learn more about what it can do. And so let's say I want to just list, and I know that we have a bucket that we keep data in. Let's see how this looks like. You see here, this is a typical example how I would get from AWS command, unless I do anything special. But if I do this and I just say star, it's going to list me all the data that we have there. And it was pretty fast. If I want to now do this DU, for example, okay, all this data, all that's fine and everything else. But what it really, how much of the data is there? For example, this is now a very interesting thing. I can see DU, and then I can use humanize, which means that it's going to give me a result in human-friendly numbers. And I do this, and basically it ran the statistics, and for almost 7,900 objects, it basically pulled out and told me that in this bucket we have essentially 250 gigabytes of data. And that's really something that I had to do so much more with the AWS command rather than this kind of a one-liner simple thing. Other than that, if you want to find out what LS can do, for example, as I said, I'm not going to pull any data out of it because I don't want to. But LS is E-tag, humanize, show full path. This is, for example, also interesting to see what that means. Okay. What that was? Show full path. Okay, so it's more just the full S3 URIs for each object in the bucket. Oops. So yeah, I that's for a little demo. Obviously, if you have some other ideas, you can try on the buckets where you can afford to spare some money on data egress. But the one that also looks interesting is run multiple commands in parallel, so that you can actually have commands in the text file, and then you just sort of execute them and pass on to this command. It can execute them in some kind of parallel fashion. And somewhere down here, I thought that there is let me see. Let me see. I saw it somewhere. There was no. I see. So there is a way that you can specify how many workers you want to employ for any task, and default value is 256 workers essentially for any task that you give it. But you can say less or more. But obviously, and now you have concurrency and all these kind of settings that we can really fine tune what you want from performance. And here are the benchmarks. So compared by other tools like s3cmd that I knew of, s4cmd I never heard of, AWS, yes, I used a lot, and I use a lot. Goofy is something, no, never heard of it or used it. But obviously you can see it kind of really holds its promise that it's really, really fast. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I have obviously there's so many more things that can be done with this command that it's almost like way above that I ever would need. I would stop with copy or sync and listing and du. But yeah, I found it very, very interesting and very unique in terms of performance and the ability and richness of features. So if you are someone who kind of works with S3 object stores, and it's not only AWS, I think they talk about somewhere up here that it's Google Cloud Storage support. So obviously any object storage that has S3 API compatibility, s5cmd can work, although probably with a little bit more command line options. Like here, you have to change the endpoint URL and that kind of stuff. But other than that, yeah, I plan to now exclusively use it for my work. I'm not going to use AWS anymore, especially because in some contexts, AWS command used to bring some weird Python dependencies that prevented my other packages to sort of upgrade to newer versions. And so this one, because it's written in Go, kind of enables me to sort of become more independent in the Python land. So yeah, I plan to use this from now on. And so that's that. I have nothing more. If there are any questions or comments, please forward. Other than that, I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Does John know about this tool? I mean, John Reedy?
Well, he'll know if you watch my Call the Doctor session.
Okay, good.
Yes. No, I have not told him yet, but I think I have, or maybe I did. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Because this might be an interesting way to examine for an HSDS endpoint. Yeah, if you want to look at the underlying inventory, you could use it for that, for example.
Yes, absolutely. And I saw that we have some buckets with HSDS sort of storage, but I didn't want to go there I stayed with this more one that we have this sample files, HDF files. But yeah, absolutely. That was another thing that would be very useful, especially when you have these UIDs for for in the key name in the keys. So it's much easier. For example, if you could pull out, and that's maybe a good test to see if it can help us. That you just have a sort of like a regular expression, simple one with some kind of UID numbers in it, and whether or not it'll be able to sort of find only objects with that pattern in the keys, or you want to copy it or something like that. So that would be really useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And earlier you mentioned something querying JSON objects or something like that. Maybe you showed that and I just wasn't paying attention.
That's the
okay.
It's called Amazon S3 Select.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's actually something that I don't know if it's available to you for free or you pay when you use it. I think there is some cost. But I think also, and that's for someone was telling me about, that this is also if you have objects that essentially contain JSON. Essentially, it's almost like a JSON per line kind of storage format.
Mm-hmm.
So every line in the file is a JSON into itself, and then it goes through it or some other way. But it's basically for JSON style data, which a lot of logging kind of applications do this. They store in JSON these days. So I think that's why it's mostly done. But SQL as old as it is, still it's very popular. People like it, and so I'm not surprised that there are all these kind of ways to help users with their data in JSON.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because many people who might be using like a secondary store, whether it's MongoDB or something else, to in double quotes index their S3 stuff, they might get away with just this. They don't really need a secondary database that they have to keep coherent anyway with what's in S3. And
yeah, and I have not really ever used it or something. Maybe this is comes with more restrictions. Maybe they expect certain way of JSON and some things, whereas MongoDB or anything like that will just give you whatever JSON you store. They'll chew it through and give you more freedom and flexibility. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that can be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it says currently do not support subqueries or joins, which MongoDB would. But then, hey, it really depends. If you don't really need that, then this might be just good enough. And yeah,
Absolutely.
Copies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, I found that to be a little too much. I mean, yes, but other things here really much more attractive to me than that one. I think it's just like cool. But I would say, I mean, I would really wildcards, summaries of these things, and grouping by storage class, which I don't know exactly what that would be, but I guess it recognizes some file extensions or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, AWS was, okay, it's useful, but it's really awkward in many ways. I mean, it really wasn't really useful to work with if you really needed to examine what's in your bucket and where it is and everything else. This one comes really close to really making, as far as I was, able to determine in this short 2 weeks, that really makes me feel almost I'm not working anymore with the S3 bucket. It's now literally like a file system on my computer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll definitely continue using it.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you mentioned that can it do sort of range gets and things like that? So I'm just picturing I have a bucket full of HDF5 files in some form, and now I want to do something with those HDF5 files or extract certain things. And
sorry.
Yeah. I guess it would be more powerful if you had sort of, we were talking a little bit about H5 map or something, some JSON that like a sidecar with these HDF5 blobs. And then you could do sort of a two-pass thing where in the first pass you get from the JSON whatever you need about these blobs, and then you in the second pass, you actually get the data from the HDF5 blobs.
I mean, the close that I could find what you're saying, but it's not the right thing. But this is like, but this is CSV files. But he's basically showing here where you can sort of get some file. But yeah, but this is more. Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same. But yeah, I think that maybe what you would need to do is then you would maybe have this kind of select statement that gives you something, and then you would feed it some other command line tool on your computer, and that command line tool would then do the range gets thing. But yeah, I don't think it can do range gets. Yeah. So that.
Cool.
That's all I have today. Any questions now? Some people thought about asking some HDF questions now.
No, Alexander, I just had, there was I think 2 paragraphs on where does all this speed come from. I think it's down at the bottom of the page you're on, right after the performance charts, where it compared it to the alternatives. There was, oh yeah, where does all the speed come from? So it's heavily parallelized and written in Go, and that's what is really giving it its advantage here. I see. Okay, thanks.
In cloud, everything has to be parallelized. It's the only way you can speed up things. There is no other trick.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. And that's all. So no more questions or anything. Thanks for joining, and be sure not to forget the next Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Alexander.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.